General mocked a quiet woman until her Navy SEAL tattoo made the entire base fall silent. When Dr. Lena Carter first stepped onto the military base, she carried herself with quiet grace and calm focus. As a civilian contractor assigned to oversee medical operations, she spoke little, listened more, and never demanded attention. Her calmness unsettled some and irritated others, especially General Hawkins, a man who believed authority was proven through volume and intimidation. During the morning briefing, when Lena offered a suggestion about improving soldier recovery times, the general smirked and mocked her in front of the room, asking if she'd ever seen real action outside of an office. Laughter rippled through the officers. Lena only lowered her gaze and smiled slightly, her silence more powerful than any defense she could have given. What no one in that room realized was that the quiet woman they underestimated had once walked through deserts and jungles with America's most elite warriors. Later that evening, while the men bragged in the mess hall, Lena slipped away to the training yard. Under the floodlights, she assembled and disassembled a service rifle with mechanical precision, her hands steady and fast, her breath controlled. She ran the obstacle course alone, completing it faster than the base's record time. A few young recruits passing by froze in shock, watching this supposedly gentle doctor move like a ghost in the dark. There was strength in her every motion, a discipline that could not be faked. The next day, during a field exercise, disaster struck when a training drone malfunctioned and began spinning out of control, heading straight toward the recruits. Panic erupted as soldiers scattered for cover. Before anyone could react, Lena sprinted across the open field, dove beneath the spinning drone, and shut it down with a move so clean it looked rehearsed. The general stormed over, furious, yelling that she could have been killed. Lena stood tall, brushing dirt from her uniform, and quietly replied, "Protocol 7, countermeasure response." The general's expression faltered. Only those with top-level combat training knew that code. From that moment, whispers filled the base. Soldiers began to wonder who Dr. Carter really was. Some said she trained special forces. Others claimed she had once saved an entire SEAL unit under fire. To silence the rumors, General Hawkins challenged her to a public marksmanship test. He was sure she'd decline. Instead, Lena stepped forward, picked up the rifle, and fired, each shot landing dead center even through the thick fog. When she removed her jacket to wipe her neck, the unmistakable Navy SEAL trident tattoo glinted on her shoulder. The yard went silent. The same men who had laughed at her now stood frozen, their respect instant and complete. General Hawkins lowered his head slightly, realizing the woman he mocked had once earned honors he could never dream of. Lena said nothing more. She simply walked away, leaving behind a silence that carried a lesson stronger than any speech. True strength never needs to shout. The next morning, the sun rose over the base with a hard, white glare, the kind that made the desert dust glow. General Hawkins stood tall at the edge of the training field, barking orders to the recruits as they prepared for their combat drills. He made sure Dr. Lena Carter was there to watch, hoping to show her what real military work looked like. Lena stood quietly among the officers, her hands folded behind her back, observing the chaos of movement and shouting commands without a word. The soldiers sprinted, fired, and dropped into the dirt. But her sharp eyes noticed a few flaws in the system, timing errors, poor communication, and a malfunctioning drone hovering too close to the perimeter. She said nothing, but her jaw tightened. The general glanced at her occasionally, his smirk returning whenever she flinched at the noise of gunfire. He was enjoying her discomfort, unaware that nothing in this field could truly shake her. Moments later, as the drone operator reset the controls for the next sequence, the machine suddenly began to spin out of control. A mechanical whine cut through the air, high and angry, and the drone veered off course, slicing dangerously low toward the recruits. Panic spread instantly. Soldiers ducked for cover, some shouting into radios, others freezing in confusion. The drone's blades whirred like razors as it descended, one wrong move away from disaster. Hawkins yelled for the operators to shut it down, but the signal link had failed. Then, before anyone could process what was happening, Lena moved. She dropped her clipboard, sprinted across the open field, and dove straight toward the spinning drone. The officers gasped as she rolled through the dirt, her movements clean, fast, and deliberate. Without hesitation, she grabbed a maintenance rod, timed her move perfectly, and struck the drone's central rotor, forcing it to collapse safely into the ground. Sparks flew for a second, and then there was silence. She stood up, covered in dust, and inspected the wreck like a mechanic checking her own work. The soldiers slowly lifted their heads, disbelief washing over their faces. General Hawkins stormed toward her, anger masking the confusion in his voice. "Who authorized that? You could have been killed," he shouted. Lena turned her calm eyes toward him and said evenly, "Protocol 7, Countermeasure Response." The words hit the air like a secret being revealed. Several officers exchanged uneasy glances. Only top-tier special operations personnel ever used that protocol. Hawkins froze mid-step, his authority faltering for the first time. "Where did you learn that?" he demanded. She brushed the dirt off her sleeve and replied quietly, "Old habits from an old team, sir." The general stared at her for a long moment, trying to read the meaning behind her calm. The recruits looked at her with new respect, realizing that the quiet woman they had overlooked might have once commanded the kind of respect few ever earned. From that day, the whispers began, whispers that would soon silence the entire base. By the next week, whispers about Dr. Lena Carter had consumed the entire base. Soldiers spoke her name in low tones in the mess hall, trading stories none could confirm. Some swore she had served as a combat medic in the Middle East. Others claimed she trained SEAL operatives in counterinsurgency tactics. No one truly knew, but everyone felt it. There was something about the way she moved, the calm in her eyes, that made her different. Even the general, who had mocked her at first, started to feel uneasy around her silence. He needed to reassert control, to prove to everyone that he was still the highest authority on that base. So he decided to test her publicly, hoping to expose her as nothing more than an overconfident civilian. That afternoon, he called the entire unit to the shooting range. The soldiers stood in a long line, their boots sinking slightly into the sand, the sun reflecting off their rifles. "Let's see how our guest performs under pressure," the general announced, his voice carrying a hint of mockery. He handed her a rifle and gestured toward the targets lined up hundreds of meters away. Lena looked at the weapon for a moment, her expression unreadable, then nodded politely and stepped into position. The base fell into silence, every soldier watching, the air thick with curiosity. She inhaled deeply, adjusted her stance, and in one smooth motion, fired. The bullet struck dead center. She fired again, another perfect hit, and again. Each shot echoed with surgical precision, each impact marking the bullseye like it was drawn for her alone. The general's confident smirk began to fade. He ordered the range operator to release the moving targets. They slid across the field unpredictably, designed to trick even seasoned snipers. Lena didn't hesitate. She tracked each motion effortlessly, her breathing controlled, her focus unbreakable. Every bullet landed exactly where it needed to. Then, as the final target appeared, a small one hidden partially in the fog, she squinted slightly, lowered the rifle, and exhaled. One clean shot rang out. The distant target cracked open dead center. Silence fell over the field. Not a single soldier dared to speak. General Hawkins forced a laugh, the sound sharp and uncomfortable. "Beginner's luck," he said, trying to dismiss what everyone had just witnessed. Lena said nothing. The wind tugged gently at her hair as she removed her jacket to wipe her neck. That's when everyone saw it. The unmistakable Navy SEAL trident tattoo etched just below her shoulder, bold and undeniable. Gasps rippled through the ranks. Every soldier there knew what that symbol meant. It wasn't decoration, it was legacy, carved into those who had survived the impossible. The general's face drained of color. The proud smirk he wore so often vanished completely. For the first time, he stood silent before her. In that moment, every person on that base understood that the quiet woman they had underestimated had once belonged to a brotherhood of warriors who didn't boast, didn't threaten. They simply acted. And now they all knew exactly who they were standing before. The entire training field froze in silence. Every soldier's eyes locked on the tattoo that glistened faintly on Dr. Lena Carter's shoulder. The Navy SEAL trident, carved deep and clean, wasn't just a mark. It was a declaration of everything she had endured, everything she had survived. It was the symbol of a warrior who had gone through hell and returned stronger. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to pause, carrying only the soft metallic rattle of rifles being lowered in respect. General Hawkins stood there, his face pale and tight. The smirk he had worn for days was gone, replaced by a look of disbelief and something he hadn't shown in years: humility. For a long moment he couldn't find his voice. When he finally did, his words stumbled out weakly. Something about respecting experience. But everyone could hear the shake in his tone. His authority had crumbled in the shadow of Lena's quiet strength. The soldiers who once laughed now stood at attention, their postures rigid, their eyes heavy with respect. They realized that this woman, the one they'd dismissed as an outsider, had walked through battles none of them could imagine. They remembered the stories whispered about SEAL operations, the missions that never made the news, the soldiers who returned with scars that spoke louder than words. Lena Carter had been one of them. She didn't need medals or titles. Her presence alone carried a gravity that demanded reverence. She didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat, didn't need to prove anything. Her silence was her armor, her calmness a reminder that true strength never needed to shout. Later, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, the truth about her past spread across the base. Files once sealed by military intelligence were quietly acknowledged. Lena had led a covert SEAL medical team during a high-risk mission in Afghanistan, deep behind enemy lines. When her unit was ambushed, she had stayed behind to rescue 6 wounded soldiers under heavy fire, holding the line until extraction arrived. Her actions had saved dozens of lives, but the mission's classified nature meant her identity was buried for years. No one outside the highest ranks had ever known her name. Now, that same woman had returned, not for fame, not for authority, but to train a new generation in what real resilience looked like. From that day forward, the tone on the base changed. Recruits who once laughed at mistakes now trained harder, spoke softer, and carried themselves with pride. Even General Hawkins, once so arrogant, started listening more and commanding less. When Lena walked through the grounds, men and women stood taller, saluting with genuine respect. She never asked for it, but they gave it anyway. Silence became the new language of power and humility, the badge of honor. Everyone on that base knew exactly who had taught them that. Dr. Lena Carter, the quiet woman who didn't have to roar to be heard.